So I'm going to bring a question to Gareth in terms of your experience. So Gareth, is in your experience, you've done a lot of coaching of people at different levels, right, in their employee life cycle, in their career. And do you believe that there are self-perceptions, or are there any intrinsic motivations which an employee needs to sort of reflect on? Because the journey between an organization and employee is two ways, and it has to go hand in hand. So in your conversations with your clientele, how does the self-perception, intrinsic motivation, how does that come about? And what are your inputs to the person? Because I mean, at our place, the input can't simply be, hey, you do not like this, leave it, move on. So how do you handle those situations? What can be your inputs for the audience here today?
Yes, Shikha, thank you for that very insightful question. And I think a lot of what I'm going to answer has actually come out of your question in terms of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So when my work in clinical coaching, forensic and business psychology, I get to work at an organizational level and at the one-on-one level, and then at the co-coaching level. So I work with the staff member. So the employer will say, this staff member is dysfunctional. I'm handing them over to you, fix them. And then I'll spend time with the client, and I'll say, wait a second, the issue is not a dysfunction with the individual. It's actually a misalignment of communication and or values between the staff member and their manager, or the staff member and the organization. So if we look at someone who's onboarding in a new company, they may be fresh out of university or out of another cultured company. So each company has its own types of culture. They're in a role, so they have roles and responsibilities. There's key performance indicators in terms of how they are measured. And we then make the assumption that if we as employees have an issue at work, that our employer can magically read our mind, and that if we are performing well, we're saying, wait a second, I know I'm going to get this promotion, I know I'm going to be given praise, and I'm just waiting for this praise to come, and it doesn't come. And then this is where the invisible employee syndrome comes in. It's because we're saying, well, I'm meeting my targets, I'm showing up early, I work through lunch sometimes, I'm burning out, and I'm just praying and hoping that my employer sees this amazing amount of energy that I'm giving, but they don't. So what happens is we end up with people who then become deflated and despondent. They say, well, my employer doesn't recognize me, they don't value me. And as a result, my motivation goes from here down to here, and it becomes mediocre. So if I look at employees working in the workspace, there's the three C's that I look at. I look at confidence, competence, how competent am I, and consistency. So with staff members, it's very easy to see their competence in their work by their output, by their key performance indicators. They're competent because they're able to engage with the client, generate a report, analyze data, respond to emails, attend meetings on time, all of these various things that show competence in problem solving. Then there's the consistency. They do this consistently. They show up for work. They are not late. They are doing what they can to show that they are serious about the work that they are doing. The last one, which I mentioned first, is the confidence. So confidence is learned. It's a learned behavior. We're not born with confidence. And so what we assume as managers and leaders and people who've been in an organization for a long time is that we have the confidence to get on with the job and to get moving. And if we see something that's not right, we go to our manager and say, can we improve this? Or I see some things that need to be changed. But not everyone has that level of competence. So as a result, they feel sidelined, and their perception, as you mentioned earlier, Yashika, shifts to one of negativity, one of high levels of stress, anxiety, and they have a downward spiral towards this invisible employee syndrome. So when they're not recognized, when the boss walks past them and doesn't greet them, that's reinforced in their mind that they are invisible, that they're of no value. So it's a 360 approach. So for me, when it comes to the staff member, I look at their self-leadership. How do they lead? How do they show up to their job? Do they have a voice? Do they have a line of communication where they are on equal terms with their manager, where they can speak the same language without being shot down, where they can share ideas without being attacked? So it's learning to communicate better, and it's something that the leaders and managers in the organization can do. They can recognize the introverts, they can recognize the ambiverts, they can recognize the extroverts. Extroverts are it's far easier for an extrovert to raise their hand in a meeting and say, I don't understand, this doesn't make sense, why don't we do it this way? An introvert will be having all of these discussions in their head and saying, I just want to say something, but my heart's racing at 1,000 beats a minute, I can't do this. So it's the manager's role to identify the type of staff that they're dealing with, and then say, wait a second, this staff member is performing well in work. And I'll say, okay, Shika, what are your inputs? We see you in the meeting, you're working in this area. What are your views on this? What can we do better? And that's when Yashika then comes up and says, well, we could possibly do this and this and this. And what we do unknowingly is we then start to allow Yashika to empower herself in the role so that she can build up her confidence. Because when we have confidence, competence, and consistency in alignment, we start to move away from the invisible employee to one who is visible. So not everyone is going to become a leader in an organization, but we do not need a title to lead ourselves. We do not need a title to ask questions to someone above us, lower down, left or right. So it's about having the space to be aware of where strengths and weaknesses, and having the space to have an open line of communication with those who we report to. And so there's something that, just to finish up on the side with to answer your question, 2 things I've learned as a leader and a manager over the last 25 years. If we are going to criticize someone in their work, never, ever, ever do it in a group environment. It's a form of corporate bullying and can lead to the person's ego and sense of self being diminished. They feel embarrassed. So we praise publicly, we acknowledge what the person has brought to the table publicly. We can say, wow, Ankita came up with this fantastic idea that we're going to trial this for the next few weeks in this team and see how it goes. Ankita, well done. Thank you for that. We're going to try it. We're going to compare it to our existing models and see if we can incorporate it and make our systems better. So you're now taking an employee of the company, shining a spotlight on them in a healthy way, and giving them that sense of confidence and acknowledgement. And that again moves them away from that invisibility, takes the invisibility cloak off and allows them to be seen. If an error is made, if mistakes are made, we do it one-on-one. So we praise publicly and we criticize privately. And when we criticize, it's not just criticism, we give constructive feedback as to how to improve. So we don't leave them in a vacuum. That's valuable.
Thank you so much, Gareth. I think that was a very holistic response